One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. You know, one of my biggest goals here is to raise awareness on domestic violence. And one of the best parts of this journey has been meeting people who are just as passionate and honestly a lot more creative than I am. My guest today is Christopher Quigley, an incredible artist who is using immersive art to raise awareness and to help people, specifically men and boys, recognize the role they play in intimate partner violence. Seriously, you have to listen to this episode to hear what he is creating. It's amazing. So anyway, enough of this preview. Let's jump into the conversation. Hi, Christopher. I'm thrilled to have you here and welcome. And thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Ingrid. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm very, very excited about our conversation. But before we jump into that, could you just give some of a background so we can all get to know you?
My name is Christopher Quigley. I'm an artist. I live on the east coast of Nova Scotia. I live in a little town called Mahone Bay, about 1,000 people. Previous to this, I had been living in Manhattan for about a decade, and I come from a fabrication background. I've been involved in businesses and companies that have built large-scale custom items, and one of the largest ones one of the most notable that we've ever built was the chandelier that's in Cleveland, Ohio. That's in between the theater and the financial district, and we're in the Guinness Book of World Records. So my background is I have built big things my entire career, and I am now embarking on a national and international public art campaign that addresses gender-based violence and intimate partner violence with an immersive and interactive public art installation.
And I keep saying I'm excited, but I really, ever since we did our pre-interview, I've been really looking forward to this. So before we get into all the details of that, can you just say why you decided to do this?
So coming from Manhattan, every day, there was a murder. It's Manhattan. You've got several million people, and it's a sad reality. That's a time that we live in. That is an inevitability. And so when I moved to Mahone Bay, and when I came back to Canada, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to live. And I started on the west coast of Canada, and I drove across the country until I ran out of land. Ended up in a little tiny community called Kingsburg, and then came back to Mahone Bay. And unfortunately, on April 25th, 2023 at 10 a.m., I suffered a massive stroke in front of a pie shop. I had 2 strokes in total, one in front of a pie shop, which I couldn't think of anything being more poetic than stroking out in front of a pie shop. And another one, and I wasn't expected I wasn't expected to live through the second one. But it rewired me in a way that I'm really kind of grateful for. I'm a very different man than I was previous to the stroke. I am far more emotional. I have access to my emotions it's a bit of a trigger finger. So when we had our pre-interview, I was like, I cry really easily. So we'll be prepared for that. But in this little town on January 5th, 2025, there was a woman that was murdered in my small town. Her name was Elaine Mosher. I always want to give her name, and I always want to make sure that I say her name, because we always talk about statistics about women that were killed by their partners through intimate partner violence or some sort of gender-based violence, and they just become a statistic. And I wanted to keep her name in my mouth. I want to keep saying her name. Her name was Elaine Mosher, and she had a life, and she had a family, and she had people that loved her. And she lived in this little town. And it affected me, really, really affected me. And I had to do something to get involved. I had to do something. I had a unique background. I had resources, and I have the ability to. I'll just put this out there. I am a gay white male, and I have a lot of privilege, and I can probably make anything happen. I don't have a lot of limitations. And so I went to a woman named Kellyanne Hamshaw, who is the executive director of Harbor House Transition Services, and said I needed to do something. I really need to get involved. And the idea was to create housing. That was the original idea, to create housing. And one of the possibilities was buy the house that Elaine was murdered in, convert it, renovate it, cleanse it, and donate it back to one of the transition services for housing so that women, when they leave the emergency crisis shelter, can move into a really nice house and turn something that was a really negative experience into something that would be really positive and really lovely and in her name, in Elaine Mosher's name. And Kellyanne was like, thank you, but no thank you. And I was really I was devastated at that because I was like, we have this ability to do this. And she's like, we have a capital housing plan in plan already, but thank you. But I looked you up. She's like, you're a middle-aged man. I had to look you up to see who you were and, see your history. And she just said, would you be interested in creating something that allowed men to step up and to take a more active role in solving gender-based violence and intimate partner violence? And this was part of a plan that came out through something called the Mass Casualty Report. We had a mass shooting here, and it was a devastating thing that happened in our country, and it's very rare. It's a very rare occurrence. So we had a mass casualty report that came out, and one of the issues that came up was that this person that had committed this atrocity also had been involved with, intimate partner violence and had a history of that. So it was a bad situation. And she said, would you be interested? And I said, you know what? Yes, I would, not knowing what it was that I was going to create. But her and I just sat and chatted, and we did this for weeks. And we called it our Waiting for Godot moments. And I don't know if you've ever seen the play or read the book or the movie Waiting for Godot. I don't recommend it. It's really boring. And so I'll give you the Coles notes. It's two guys in a tree talking about systems, waiting for somebody to show up to clear up the system. And we called it our Waiting for Godot moments. I don't mean to be esoteric, but this is just what we called it. And so I went away for about 8 weeks and came back with this idea of this project and kind of understood. And I had this understanding that, within every home and every trope that we've ever seen in movies and plays and books, women always lock themselves in the bathroom because it's the safest room. It's the only one that has a lock. And I had to look at my own history because I have a history. I lived with, my father was an abusive man. I remember him when I was 4 years old, the very first time that I remember him abusing my mother. And I recall that very clearly. And I recall the times when I was growing up where the scariest place for me was the locker room in the boys' bathroom in school, because that's where I got beat up. That's where I got made fun of. That's where I learned the vernacular. That's where I learned the misogyny, and I heard the jokes and laughed at the jokes. And where I'd been assaulted was in the bathroom. So I wanted to take that space, the bathroom, a public bathroom or a bathroom with a door with a lock, and transform that space from that final dangerous space that someone is in and use it as the medium and as the space, both metaphorical and literal, to be like, this is where it starts. This is how boys are socialized. This is a piece that's meant for boys, young men, and men to experience, to go, here's a mirror. Here's what you've learned. Here's what you've been taught. And when you show them what they've been taught, then they can accept it and understand it. So it's 8 bathroom stalls. It's part of a traveling public art immersive exhibition. And it's 8 separate bathroom stalls that each deal with a theme of gender-based violence or intimate partner violence. And so that's how this really all came about was, and it's dedicated to Elaine Mosher and her family and all the other women that have been murdered. This goes to the December 6th anniversary, which is the anniversary of the shooting at École Polytechnique, where another mass shooting had happened 31 years ago. So that's how this happened. That's how this started. Was had a stroke, rewired my brain, wanted to do something because the first half of my life, and I'm 52, the first half of my life I did really well. This half I need to do good. So I'm taking this second chance that I got after the stroke to do good with what I have been given and the resources that I have and the skills that I have and the acumen that I have to put something out into the world that will do some good.
And before we get into more of the details of the actual art piece, do you think that just the way your life played out, the fact that you had the stroke and then you moved to this area and you found out about Elaine, do you think if it had not happened in that order, do you think that you would have felt this drive to do it?
It's hard not to mythologize stuff like this. So I understand that. And I am where I am because of where I am. The things that have led to this part of my life, all the things and the decisions and the actions and all the things that have happened to me have led to this point. And it was actually a friend of mine that said, it's kind of hard not to mythologize these kind of things. And I was like, yeah, it's hard not to. It's like, but he's like, there are no circumstances or what is that? There are no coincidences. Sorry, there are no coincidences. And I don't believe that I would have come to this without those things having happened. And being able to meet with somebody like Kellyanne, who saw something in me and was like, would you be willing to take something like this on? This is a big, and I thought it was going to be regional. And now it's turned into something that's going across my country. And now I'm being invited to galleries in the United States to present this project in galleries throughout the United States. And who knows where it'll go after this, but that's the long answer to a question that I think probably just could have been like, yes. Or no, I don't think I would have come up with this if these things hadn't happened to me. I don't think I'd be on this path.
Right. One of my favorite things is speaking with individuals who have things happen to them in this specific order. And I think it's so cool for somebody to be able to look back and see like, well, I had my experience with art and I was able to do all of this. And then, the rewiring of your brain, as you say, with the strokes, and then just all of these things happening. And it just fascinates me with people who look back and they're like, okay, that all of these things happen. And I feel like I'm being like pulled, led, whatever, however you want to look at it, into doing something with this. That's awesome.
Yeah. And one of the sides of this is that, and other people that I've talked to that are, even in my stroke recovery groups and like people that I've been in contact with, it always comes down to this one core precept is that all of us have had a brush with their mortality. And not everybody has that. Not everybody's been that close. And when I was in the hospital and they said, the type of stroke that you've had, which is a clot stroke, right? They were like, we don't expect that if you have another one, these come in clusters and you might have 2 or 3 or more, but we don't expect that you're going to survive. And I thought that was going to be like a really epiphanal and emotional moment. It wasn't. It was very matter of fact. I wasn't like torn up. I wasn't like, it wasn't like in the movies or in where you have like this massive emotional breakdown. I was like, oh, okay. They're like, you need to get your affairs in order. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. I have to call my mother. I have to call my sister. I need to get my affairs in order. And, in the next 48 hours, by the time they get here, I might not be here. So every time I had a nap or I was falling asleep, I thought every time that that was going to be it, that I wasn't going to wake up. Anytime I went to the bathroom, without giving too much information, I thought that was going to be it. Anytime even if I sneezed, I thought this is going to be it, because that's just the reality. But it wasn't emotional. It was matter of fact. And that lasted for months afterwards. Even as I was recovering, there's always that fear of like, oh, this could just happen because it happened. I'll remember that date the rest of my life, April 25th, 10 a.m. 2023. I will remember that date because it just happened out of the blue. With I'm a healthy guy. I had just gone out on a hike with my dog for 7 miles the day before. We had gone to beaches, we'd gone running, I eat healthy, and this still happened to me. So my mortality brought me, that brush with my mortality brought it very clear that all I'm leaving with are experiences. That's all I'm leaving with. I'm not leaving with anything on. I'm not leaving with the clothes on my back. I'm not leaving with the car I drive, with the art that I collect. None of that's going to be coming with me. But what I'm leaving with is a legacy and my experiences. So that's been the common precept with most of the people that I've talked to that have had a similar experience that I have, is that brush with their mortality changes you. It adjusts your perception, and it adjusts how you feel about your space and how you move through space and how you move through time and what you do with it, what you have left. So that's how it affected me.
Yeah. And not only did you survive, but then, you and I had talked before about how I'm a nurse practitioner. I've always worked in cardiology, and obviously we're not in the same place, but I see no stroke residual, which is incredible.
You don't see them. I know they're there. Mine are left side and some emotional stuff. So I have some of there are some physical left side deficiencies and some emotional regulation things that I know are there. So I'm very lucky. Like I said, I was very, very lucky. I understood like the severity and the size of the stroke that I had could have left me incapacitated for the rest of my life, or, in some way, not able to do what I'm doing now. So I'm not taking that for granted. And I don't take it for granted that I was spared, but all I am is lucky. That's it. It's not by skill or anything else. I'm just lucky.
Right. I didn't have like an abrupt mortality moment like that, but I did have, a moment with, it's a domestic violence podcast. So with my abuser, there was a moment where now I look back and realize statistically, I should not be here. There was a high likelihood of me being murdered. So that's, it does make you look back. And like for me, it was this happened. I'm not of the faith of God punishes people or God gives people these trials and tribulations, but I am of where if you have overcome something in your life, you look back and you think, what can I do with this now? I beat the statistics, and is there something else I can do with my life moving forward?
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is beautiful. So I really,
it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would, let's talk about it. Let's see what you're doing.
Let's get in.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
Traveling art exhibit.
Yeah.
And how big are we talking? It's huge.
So it's going to be a large piece. It's going to take up about 1,000 square feet. But I'll give you a little bit of, as I was growing up, because I grew up in the kind of household that I grew up in and what it was like for me. Like I grew up in a small town of about 8,000 people at the time. And it was a little farming community. I rode rodeo till I was about 16 and rode horses and, lived on a farm and had very, very, very free access to things. But I also came out as gay when I was like 14. in a little town. So I was subject to a tremendous amount of violence, both physical and, as I got older, sexual violence, and having dealt with a father that was abusive as well. So it's part of my history, and my lived experience through this is that I always gravitated to horror films because it was predictable. The horror was predictable. I always knew there was a formula. I knew what was going to happen, and it was very opposite to what I was living with, which was chaotic and unpredictable, and I never knew what was going to happen from day to day. So I really gravitated to horror films because they just were fun and they were escapism, and it was a violence that was beyond what I was dealing with, but it was predictable because they're all the same. It's just a formula. So when I was developing this piece, one of my favorite places was at the Midway when the county fair was in, and the haunted house. That was my favorite place to be because that was, again, there was a formula to it. I knew I was going in there, I was going to get scared, and I had to walk through it myself. And so this piece is very reminiscent of that, and I take elements of what that haunted house is supposed to be. That these 8 stalls that you go in and experience, each one at a time, are more or less a modern house of horrors that you have to walk through. It'll be in a blacked out room, about 1,000 square foot blacked out room. There will be 8 4-foot by 4-foot by 10-foot tall bathroom stalls. So you enter in and the door locks behind you, and then there is an experience that you experience for a period of time until the door unlocks and you go out, but you are meant to experience this. And the first one, and I'll talk about three of the stalls that we're doing, because there are 8 in total, and each one, again, delves into and touches on a theme. And the first one is called the locker room stall, because that's where boys are socialized, and where men my age, it was an analog transfer of information, where we learned it from our uncles and our fathers and our grandfathers, and we learned it from our coaches and our teammates, and how to exact dominance over each other, where we learned the jokes, where we learned the words, where we learned how to treat each other, and where we learned how to talk about girls. Not so much me, but everybody else. But that was where that transfer of knowledge happened, was in the locker room. And that first stall is that acknowledgement to say, this is how this starts. And now we're dealing with the transfer of information from men to boys, from strangers, from men online that have a microphone and a platform and a pulpit, and they espouse these violent, very far-right theories to impressionable young men and boys who don't even know who they are yet. And it's being done at a scale that I think it's very hard for people to comprehend the actual scale of how these boys are being socialized now by men online, these mediocre white men with a microphone, telling boys what is masculine, how to perform their masculinity differently. And masculinity is a performative act, and you get to choose. And so I want this first stall to kind of show the transmutation of analog socialization to the digital, and how it's even more dangerous because it's still behind closed doors. It's still being hidden. And these boys are being taught how to hate. Not only how to hate, but who to hate. And they're being given tools to hate. And this is that first stall, is to go, this is how this is evolving. The fourth stall in the series is about consent. And so one of the things that this was based on is that there's a lot of white papers by a lot of very smart people that are smarter than me, that I have taken their information and read through and went, how do I make a physical representation of this research, or a PhD paper? How do I make a physical representation of this? And so one of the pieces there, the fourth stall in this series is the consent stall. And it's based off of an organization. It's based off of a story called 71 No's. It's a case that happened here in Canada where either it was a city councilor or mayor's assistant was on a trip with him overseas on a trade junket or something, and this woman had to endure and had to say to this man 71 times no to his advances. 71 times had to say no to this man who just kept on and kept on. And so this stall is a physical representation of that once the participant enters in, there's a number of different stimuli that will happen that will be very uncomfortable stimuli within this space that forces you to say no, repeatedly say no, until you find and you realize you can't get out of here if you just keep pressing no. And then when you finally do press yes, is that really true consent? So if you've pressed that button 71 times with no result and you finally press yes, is that true consent? I want to express to boys and young men what consent actually looks and feels like in a physical space and in time. That if you're in this room, you are surrounded by all this visual and audio and physical stimuli that's very uncomfortable, but you keep on having to say no. What does it mean when she finally says yes? Is that real?
I love that one.
Thank you.
That one is so, so powerful. Can somebody say yes at like number 10 and get
Sure.
out, or does it go all the way? Okay.
No,
So it just, whatever
it's where you
whatever you can
finally
handle.
break down to go, fine, yes.
Oh my goodness. That one is so
It's chilling.
powerful. It really is. I have chills.
And then the very last one, the eighth stall in the series, is called the 21-second stall. And the 21-second stall is one where you enter and the door locks. Everything locks automatically. And this is an individual experience. It's very much my riding rodeo, walking through the house of horrors, swimming, any of the kind of sports that are individual. This is an individual's experience, not to be experienced as a group. You can go through it, but as an individual, you go in, you get locked in. There is consent, express consent, that you can leave when you want to. However, but the very last one is the 21-second stall, and it's meant to express and to show how much violence and how much damage can happen within 21 seconds. The last 21 seconds of a 911 call, the last 21 seconds of a man trying to beat down the door to gain access to her inside or the children inside, the last 21 seconds before the police arrive or the ambulance arrives, the last 21 seconds of a woman's life. And the 21 seconds is done very specifically because that's how long average it takes a human being to go pee. 21 seconds is the average for us to evacuate our bladder. And so I want to show that the amount of time that it takes you just to urinate, how much can happen in 21 seconds and what that sounds like and what that feels like and what that looks like. And being in that for 21 seconds, it seems like a very short period of time, but this is meant to be confrontational. It is not meant to mollycoddle boys or men because they've been socialized into this already. They're already hardened. They've already been hardened. But this is meant to be confrontational. It's meant to be visceral. And it's meant to have them come to a reckoning to go, oh, we created this. We can go further into this about the creation and the architecture, the ancient architecture of the patriarchy. But this socialization that we're living in now is our creation. And this is where we can start seeing that architecture, that ancient system of that program that has been in us for a few millennia, that it is being adjusted, that programming is being shifted. and we need to catch this. And so that's why I wanted to create this, because I don't want that to be what's left behind. If I were to drop dead tomorrow, I don't want this world left behind. I want it to be better. And I want to do what I can to make it better, to offer something. And so this was my creation.
Which I think is incredible, especially to have a man create this, because there are so few men who recognize this and are willing to say something about it. And yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I actually don't know where I was going with that.
There are plenty of, and there are not a lot that are, there are a lot that are doing a lot of very good work. There is like the International White Ribbon Campaign. There's Guy's work. There's plenty of organizations all across North America that are run by men, that are men's organizations that are doing the good work. They are all doing incredible work. But this is taking a decidedly different approach. This isn't, and I use the word mollycoddling very specifically, and I don't, I should maybe not be using that term, but I wanted something that used the same level of socialization to prove and to show boys and young men how they've been socialized. Because not all young men and boys are going to respond to trauma-informed therapy talk. They need something physical. They need something visceral. They need something tactile. They need something that's put in front of them that is just as aggressive as the things that they're learning online. And so this was coming from an artistic lens, from an artistic space, to go, we can shift perception through art. We might not be able to change, there might not be legislation being brought in through art, but we can certainly create perception changes. We can create changes within somebody's body and in their bones because of what they've seen. Because we've all seen wonderful pieces of artwork that were like, that changed me. A film, a picture, a photograph, a sculpture that were like, that really affected me. And that's what I'm trying to create with this, is that we've done, we've had women bearing the brunt of the crisis management. And now it's time for men to step up, just step up and take an active role to go, we have to fix this. We created it. Women have borne the brunt of it. They've borne the crisis response. They've borne all the pain and all the indignity of it. And men have to step up and go, no, this isn't happening anymore. But to do that, it needs to be presented to them in a way that is digestible and just as aggressive as what they're learning and what they've learned. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And, I may have unintentionally minimized what men have been doing so far, but I do absolutely recognize all of these organizations and men stepping up to make a difference. This is something where it gives, the average man an opportunity to go in and experience and come out changed. So like you mentioned, it's, the average guy isn't necessarily going to go and sit through some dissertation on intimate partner violence and the contribution men have toward that. But this is something where you can go, take in some art and come out an actual changed person because of it, which is incredible.
That's the goal. And creating it as I hate minimizing this, but creating it as a midway sideshow. It needs that. It needs that it needs to feel like it's something familiar and universal. The bathroom is universal. The haunted house, universal. The stuff that's inside of it, not so much, but it's universal. And so, the space itself, with all the cacophony of sounds coming from each one of the stalls, because they're meant to be loud. There's a metaphorical part of this that I wanted to ensure that when there's the group of participants that are going to be going in and participating in the piece, understand that it's like, even though the door is closed, We still hear what's going on. We know what's happening behind closed doors. And so if we don't say something, even when the doors are closed and we can hear this cacophony of sound, that we're still complicit. And I'll be honest, it's like that was something that I had to come to a reckoning with, because there have been times that I have been. I'm not a saint. I've laughed at jokes I shouldn't have. I didn't say something when I should have. With even women that I love and that have been friends of mine that I knew were in a situation and I said nothing. That complicity exists. And so I'm by no means a saint in this, but I'm a participant in it. So I had to come to my own reckoning. And so I want other men to have that same reckoning, to go, oh, but when you're inside of that little booth, you hear nothing other than what is inside that little booth. All the sound from outside is gone. You just are there hearing and seeing and feeling and touching what's in that little space, that confined little space.
And, it's really refreshing to hear you talk about jokes, because I think that people minimize, like jokes that are degrading to women, like, oh, well, whatever, it's just a joke. All the guys are laughing at it. Maybe I'm too sensitive for thinking that it's that big of a deal, but I do feel like it's a big deal. What do you think the role is in those kind of jokes and men's behavior?
They teach men and young boys and boys to devalue 50% of our population. That's what the jokes do. The jokes are, some are, jokes are jokes, but there's also, when you're dealing with something like this, and the language that's being used and the vernacular that's being used, and in this particular zeitgeist, it is one of those situations where you have to look at, like, the jokes are not just jokes. They hurt. They actually do things. They inject language, and they inject that programming into young boys' minds to go, oh, this is okay to talk to somebody like this. This is okay to use these words, these derogatory words. And words are just words. However, when it's attached to an entire system of oppression, and when it's attached to an entire system that is meant to subjugate one part of the population, that's the damage that it does.
It does. Hearing a joke about objectifying a woman, we hear that, we can walk away and think, I'm just reduced to a piece of ass, more or less. And then it's, well, how do I rate on that piece of assness? Like, okay, they made this joke about somebody, like, oh, you're a 5 or whatever. And then they're joking about somebody else. And then you go home and you just internalize all of that and think, okay, all I am is just this object, but I'm not even the most desired object. And you just begin to devalue yourself. And I think it also desensitizes guys to other things, like, I don't know, hanging out with the guys and somebody's going to complain about their wife. Like, oh my God, she's so annoying. She's going off on this tangent. Like, I need to smack her up a little bit and just kind of minimize that. And that's not such a big deal, right?
And that's the kind of stuff that is really insidious. And that's the stuff where, there might be somebody in the room, like somebody like me who was like, oh, maybe like you said, maybe I'm too sensitive. But it takes someone like me to go, no, that's not all right, man. Like, that's not cool. That's not cool. And that sort of thing starts very young, because we see it and we hear it and we see that it's okay, that we see the jokes that, our uncle might tell us, or, that our coach might say, like, stop running like girls, stop your crying, stop. Like, it's this pervasive language that is just part of the socialization that is the issue. And women are socialized. Girls are socialized in response to the way that boys are socialized.
You're absolutely right. Okay, so just for the technical parts of this piece, so yes, you can go into the 1,000 square foot space as a group, but you go into each stall as an individual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're in this big space, you can hear what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
when you're inside. So the technology that exists now is that we can create this din, like this, like living in New York is one of the best experiences that you can create this. You hear everything outside. But when you're inside your apartment, if you've got good windows, everything gets shut out. You only hear what's in your space. But this is meant to change people one at a time. I've got 8 options, got 8 tries with this to be able to change one person's mind, but it has to be done individually. I couldn't have a group go through and have a group experience because the way that the way that it was for me was that it was an individual experience. It was mine. It was yours. It wasn't a group experience because we've all experienced it very differently. There are commonalities, but it's meant to be it's meant to be experienced by an individual for a short period of time, 8 times. And so this entire room is blacked out, and it's just these 8 stalls with a light over top of them. The sound you can hear all around like you would at a midway. But when you're in the space, we have technology that directs sound, and we can isolate this out so that the decibels are almost minimal, down to about 30 decibels, and you only hear what's in that little room. Nothing else. You hear nothing. You might even hear your own heartbeat in one of them. It will be so insulated that we're trying to get things down below, 30 decibels inside the space. So that it's like, oh, you can hear your heartbeat. You might even hear the blood rushing through your ears. So it's that to remove that perception of time and to understand it's like, this is your space. This is where you have to sit in the shit and experience it.
And I love the immersive idea because I talk about this all the time. As a victim, you try to explain, because unfortunately victims are forced to explain of, why did you stay? Why didn't you leave? Why did whatever? But sticking somebody, an individual, into this immersive experience, you're feeling it. And it's so hard for me to talk and say, well, this is how I felt. And then to make you actually experience it. It's difficult. Some people can do it. You can tell a story and you can pull individuals right in there with you to feel these emotions. But you're physically putting somebody right there to intentionally get your heart to race, your palms sweaty, all of those physical reactions. I think that is, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how powerful I think this is. And amazing. I'm so thrilled you're doing this.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid. I'm really excited about it. And I'm so remarkably grateful that I've had the support that I've had. Like, the support that I'm getting is just off the charts. I'm off to our nation's capital on November 17th for a week, and I'm meeting with about a dozen senators and politicians to talk about the economic ramifications of gender-based violence. It was actually a comment that you brought up that stimulated, I'm like, I need to include this in this. Like, this is a massive problem when 50% of the population and 30% of that 50% can't contribute to the economy the same way. And when you told me that number of, like 8 billion or 80 billion
over $8 billion a year.
See, that was like
in the US, just in the United States.
That when we keep talking about nation building and we talk about building infrastructure, and we talk about this, that we're removing and we're forgetting about 50% of the population. And out of that 30% that just can't contribute, is unable to contribute the same way, because, gender-based violence doesn't just mean physical violence. It means economic capabilities, economic violence, financial violence. It's all encompassing. So when our governments are looking at doing funding for these, and states are looking at doing funding for these type of initiatives, we have to remember that arts and culture have to be a part of it, and that women have to be thought of, because that's 50% of our population. And if they're not contributing at 100%, we're doing ourselves all a disservice. Not to say that the economy is the be all and end all, but we have to be able to give We have to be able to have those opportunities to be equalized and to be fair. And we need to make that portion that if you're going to be doing nation building, you have to make sure that you include the entire nation.
Yeah, and the economy is important to bring up, because you can have somebody who says, well, I've never known anyone to be affected by domestic violence, which is actually untrue. Everybody
That's
knows
untrue.
somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows somebody. You just may not be aware. But even if you want to distance yourself from it and say it has not directly impacted myself or anybody within my circle, it has affected the economy. So you are affected by it, because every single person in the world is affected by their economy. And
Yeah.
this does play a humongous role in it.
And regardless of, this, both in like intimate partner violence is not a white Western concept. This was, it was brought here. It was colonialized, as was the version of patriarchy that we have here. That was a colonial export that was imposed on the indigenous population here. The reality is that our politicians have to be far more involved. They need to be looking at this far more seriously, rather than as a fringe issue or a politicized issue. It's a human issue. It's human. But even with, when I was reaching out to these senators and these politicians, I was looking at it going, oh, this is like really interesting data. And so I'm a bit of a data geek too. So I'm just going to digress for a moment. But so there is, in my country here in Canada, there's 100 senators. There are what we call our ministers of parliament, and there's 343. And then there's about 1,000 MLAs, which are the members of the Legislative Assembly, which are like they're the state's representatives and from regions around there. And I was like, this is really interesting data, because now I get to collect the data about how people respond, what they respond with, and if they respond. And so out of that, so I did a little segment that was first off of the Senate, off of all of the senators in Canada. I sent them an email and I had 4 responses, and I was devastated. It's like, this is not good. This is 4% of our Canadian senators that are responding to this. This is an important issue. Why aren't they responding? And so I did a little bit of research and was like, well, ethically, I shouldn't be telling them that I'm collecting data, because I don't want to stimulate a response, but I really do need to stimulate a response. So I sent another email saying that, oh, by the way, we're actually collecting qualitative and quantitative data and longitudinal data across the country to see how you all respond, or if you do or if you don't respond, and what you respond with. Overnight, jumped from 4% to about 18%. Still low, but better than 4. So
Yeah.
that was kind of like, so I'm using that same thing, with all the politicians going like, hey, by the way, how you respond is going to be part of our public facing document. Not that I'm going to shame anybody, but I'm just going to be like, hey, by the way, these are politicians. I would never do this in the corporate world, but in this side, on the political and the parliamentarian and the senatorial side, absolutely, I'm telling them that this data is collected. I need to force a response, so it needed some stimulus, and the stimulus was like, hey, by the way, we are collecting this data.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, these are elected officials. Like the people should know.
They should know, and I thank you for that.
For sure.
But it was your comment that stimulated that after our first
okay.
after our first conversation. That's
because it's really incredible information. Something else that I like about this is not a reactionary type of piece that you're doing, that, okay, we're only going to send the domestic violence offenders or the intimate partner violence offenders into this immersive experience. This is anybody, and this could actually prevent something from happening or cause somebody to, I mean, I don't know that it will reform somebody who already has that abusive, self in their body, but it may have somebody speak up like, this guy's behavior is not okay. This friend of mine, I need to stop tolerating these comments and these jokes and everything. And that plays a huge role because family law is overwhelmed. It is not helpful to victims. And this is mostly worldwide. I've talked to quite a few people across the world, and it's not designed to help victims. So this is something that could actually help our legal systems.
So that is like one of the things that we shun and we reject the connotation or the notion that we're an awareness campaign and that this project is an awareness campaign. And if you don't know that this is happening, you're living under a fucking rock. You know, we are all aware. Everybody's aware. Everybody is aware. There are no more awareness campaigns that can go out that will make us any more aware. So this is a prevention piece. This was meant and is the intention and the heart of this is a prevention piece. And much like what you just stated in the US, in Canada, we have gray areas where the law, and it also exists in the United States, there are gray areas where the law just doesn't cover, where it's the pre-legal space, where there's lack of legal education for our trusted intermediaries that don't know what to do when it's something that's not exactly illegal, like coercive control. That's one of the gray areas. So how do you provide that level of education to these trusted intermediaries that are social workers, a school resource counselor, a police officer, a receptionist at a doctor's office, to recognize these things and to go, this is the legal framework and this is the education that we now have to go, oh, this is a gray area where we can catch it before it becomes a legal issue. So if we can catch the coercive control, the financial control, all these things that fit within that gray area, that's where we have more prevention, where you catch it earlier and earlier on. This is not crisis management, which, you know, through North America, that for me, it's like that requires funding consistently, and that's a non-starter if they say, well, we need to cut that back, because that is not the direction. Crisis funding is going to be needed. And I don't want to say always going to be needed, because it would be, we have, even in our bylaws with my nonprofit organization, we have a portion of redundancy, is that's what we're striving towards. Like, we don't want to be needed in the future. But so we're working with law foundations across the country, starting with the Law Foundation of Ontario, to develop a legal framework and to develop a legal education modules and to develop legal education modules that focus on the gray area as part of this piece, as part of the prevention piece, to go, we're not just working on the artwork, we're also trying to create some education so that this prevention can start outside of the art piece. And so when people see it, they know how to respond to it and they have the proper education to go, oh, I know what to do here, before it becomes a legal issue, because sometimes that's all it takes.
Right. And it's going to spark conversation, which is, that's step one, is just getting people to talk about it more. And the more you talk about it, say like a group of men go to do this experience and they don't have any women with them, but they go home to whatever women in their lives, sisters, moms, spouses, partners, whatever. And they say, hey, I just went through this thing, and have you ever felt like you were coerced? Did you have to say no 71 times? And just that conversation is going to open up so many minds and spark hopefully a lot more ideas of like, you know what, maybe I could do something too. And I mean, there's creative geniuses on so many different levels. And I love the creative minds. I feel like I don't have that. I hate it. I'm very linear thinking, very black and white. So creative minds, I would love to, I just could sit in a room and just listen to all of you guys all the time. It's so interesting to me.
The really interesting part of this is that most of the men that I have talked to from, from, like, I have friends all over the world. There's a common theme. They're like, oh yeah, it was the bathroom. It was the bathroom. We all say the same thing. It's like, yeah, no, that's where, like, oh yeah, no, that's where I was, that's where this happened. That's the
Yeah,
common thing. Like, all men, we've all had it. We're like, oh yeah, that was in the locker room.
that's really interesting. When in women, for women, you go to, say, you go to your gynecologist's office. In the bathroom, you have the flyers of, what is your home life like? If you feel like you might be abused, here's a number, and you can. Well, they probably don't do that now. It's probably a QR code, but I'm of the same generation as you. So you remember those papers? You'd have like the
Yeah.
little phone numbers cut, and you could rip off one of the numbers to call. But those are in, restrooms, they're in the bars, they're in doctors' offices, all over the place. So it's the same kind of, you might be going in there to seek refuge, but then you could also see this piece of hope that might be there for you too.
All of these things are all helpful. Every little bit of information that goes out is helpful. Every crisis manager that I know, every transition house operator and employee that I've met, um, it's all about this slow erosion, because it's like something that can be, dismantled. It has to be eroded through, and I'm going to only use this word once. It can only be eroded through awareness. Like, if one person becomes aware and they become it becomes visible, they see it with both eyes, and they're like, oh, that's a little bit more of that erosion every time. And then we have a choice to participate or not. And then when you choose to participate in something that is so destructive, that's not good, but you can choose not to participate. This was my portion of, I choose to not participate, but I'm going to create this. I don't participate in this. I'm not participating in the way that men are doing this. And as a gay guy growing up, even in my early 20s, you know, was never invited to the same table that straight guys were at. Women were the same thing. Women, and I think this is why I think women and gay men have always been such fierce allies, is because we've always had to fight for the same goddamn thing. We want space at the table. So what did we do? We created our own tables. We had to be better than everybody else just to be taken half as seriously. We had to be twice as good to be taken half as seriously. And so we were always after the same thing. Like, that's my own, because I have some incredibly strong women that have been my friends for 30 years. And I look at it and I'm like, these are the women that we all grew up together. We all had to, we fought for different things, but we were fighting for the same thing. We were part of a system that was fearful. And, it wasn't a crisis of masculinity. And this was a comment that was brought up recently, that I was like, I don't think it's a crisis of masculinity. I think it's a crisis of femininity. There's such a fear.
You're right.
Such a
You're absolutely
fear.
right. I love the word erosion, because that's exactly what erosion is something that happens over time, and it happens because of consistent exposure to something. Erosion is a really wonderful word for it. And there are so many different pieces that are involved, especially if you're speaking specifically about domestic violence or intimate partner violence. There are so many pieces that are out there and that people are focusing on I'm going to take this piece to help others. I spoke with a woman, maybe it was about a year ago, in California, who has started a nonprofit for transportation. And it sounds like such a minuscule thing, but when you have a victim who's stuck in a home, who knows where they can go? I can go to my friend's house, my mom's house, my aunt's house, but they live on the other side of the county or in another state. This is a piece, we will help you get there. And there are just so many pieces that erosion is so spot on for the word.
It's in the basis of the work that I'm in, like my entire body of work that, there are other pieces that we're working on that are, we're a multidisciplinary nonprofit arts organization. And so we have theater, sculpture, other immersive works, but they're all meant to focus on societal issues and how to further the entropy. And entropy is a real big thing for me, because I always look at things as, since I was sick, is that nothing is permanent. So even the society that we live in suffers from entropy. And there are things that we can do to kind of hurry that along, that entropy. Nothing will last forever. Illness doesn't always last forever. There's always going to be a final day that you're not sick anymore. I don't need to be morbid about it, but there will be a day that you just aren't sick anymore. So nothing lasts forever. Nothing. There is nothing that is in front of us that will last forever. And so I look at this very optimistically, in that I don't think this will last forever. I think that with enough time and enough people scratching at it, that you can erode any system. But you just have to make people aware of it. But it takes time. But it is something that becomes a much larger effort to be like, I don't want to participate in this anymore. We need to scratch this away. We need to erode this. We need to hurry the entropy on this a little bit more. How do we do this? And collectively, we have such power to do that kind of thing. So, much like a drip of water on a rock, we can do. Like, I look at it very optimistically. And there was a point in time that when I was kind of creating the rupture and looking in and seeing this grand canyon of an issue in front of me, I was like, oh, I don't think I can fix anything. And kind of had to come to terms with, I may not be fixing it, but I'm making the rupture larger. That was the goal, is to create a much larger rupture to show it's like, this is really cavernous. You gotta you gotta take a look at this, because we see it for, what it is. And it just seems so very surface level. But when you get to it, you rip it open, you're like, oh, jeepers. That's the Grand Canyon down there. This is that big of an issue.
Yeah, it is. And people are going to leave your experience, and they can just be non-participants. Even if they just become a non-participant in this misogynistic behavior, that's a huge change. And who knows, there might be, like I said before, somebody who decides to go ahead and create some change based on it. Really incredible.
Well, and that's like, like I said earlier, it's like, it can come from a movie, it can come from a play. Like, there have been, I take a look back at my own history of, films that I saw that adjusted my trajectory. There's always something. There's a painting that we've seen that affected us, or, a book that we read that changed our perception of the world that we live in, or who we are as a person. And I have the utmost hope and optimism that art can has that effect on everybody. They may not know it right away, but eventually they'll be like, oh, yeah, right. Okay, now I get it. Some people just take time to process.
Right. And that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So how can, when is this going live? And then how can people keep up with you?
So to keep up with me, I'm on TikTok. I did a fairly wide spat of videos that were part of the art piece. As just the civic outreach. So right now, between now and mid-2026, I'm going to be traveling around North America, introducing this to city councils and town councils to get their support and their endorsement, and local organizations, in each municipality and each city, and presenting this project to get their support and their buy-in. That you can follow on through my website, which is alchemiaartworkshop.org. that has everything on there, that has our new initiatives that are moving forward, our other projects that we'll be working on over the next number of years. You can also see the project itself, where it came from. There's every video of there's access to interviews and things like that we've done that will kind of give everybody a really good idea. And if you want to donate, we're always open to, because we haven't started completely fundraising yet. That will come about, but if we need support, we do need dollars and cents to make these projects move forward, and it takes people, like regular people, from all kinds of people, to make stuff like this happen. And you can email me. I'm always open to discuss this. I'm in it. And if somebody wants to debate, whether or not they like it or they don't, and I've been given, I've had people that are like, I don't like what you're doing. Yeah, okay.
What is their reason?
Oh, so one of the most recent was, and I'm not going to out this person, but it was actually at the end of an interview from a reporter. And at the end of it, they turned off the recorder and said, "Thank you, that was really good." And then off the record, they were like, "I feel like you're attacking men. I feel really personally attacked by this." And I was a little taken aback, and I was put off my back. I was put on my back foot. And his immediate comment right after that was, "You know that women abuse too." And I just was like, okay, how do I handle this? And I had my board chair with me. And I diffused it very quickly by saying, I had to say, "You're right," because you're right. But 97 or 98% of the deaths that happen are because of men. The statistics kind of prove you wrong that, it is this. He's like, "Well, I feel like you're attacking men. I feel personally attacked by this. Women do this too." And I said, and then I had to bring in, I said, you got to understand, where I'm coming from is I'm not trying to shame or blame men. There's no shame or blame in this. It's just this is the reality that we have all lived in. And I said, quite honestly, and as I said earlier, it's like, I was not a saint. And I said, these are the things that I went through that made me complicit. And I was able to disarm him. But I was really quite surprised that it was because I've had it online. I've had people say that to me online, where where it's men that will say, "Hey, we really don't like the fact that the call is coming from inside the house." And I've had, but to have somebody do it directly in front of me was really surprising. Then I'm like, that's how pervasive this is. But then I said to him, clearly, me just talking about this is enough of an irritant for you. You haven't even seen the piece. It's not even built. And you're already complaining about it. So I'm like, I'm doing something right. And he's like, "Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, okay." Then he kind of was able to go, "Okay, yeah, I see what you mean." But to have it in front of me like that was really quite surprising and very shocking.
Right. I kind of feel that if your first reaction of hearing this is, "Oh, I don't like it," and I think that this is a really bad idea, because, I mean, as a woman, if I were to go through this exhibit, it may make me think about things that I've done or said or believed. Like you said, it's a mirror.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with people taking a look at themselves.
No, and that's how we learn about ourselves. We look at ourselves and go, "Oh, I need to change this."
And the thing is your exhibit is a mirror, and if they don't like what they're seeing, it's not your exhibit. It's something on the inside of them.
Very, very astute, very clear thinking.
Yeah.
Really good. Thank you.
Yeah. There you go. You can say that. Oh, it's you. It's not me.
We so rarely get a chance to do that. Oh, it is you.
It's you. It was not me. Okay. So if somebody wanted you to come to their city and they wanted to put you in contact, would they get in touch with you the same way that you were mentioning?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't hide behind anything. There is people contact me directly constantly, I'm not behind some kind of like firewall. It's like, no, if you want to talk about this, like, let's talk about it. If you love it or hate it, I don't care. Like, if I change your mind, great. If I don't, fine. You don't have to come to the piece. Like, that's your choice, man. Like, I'm not forcing you to do anything. There's no forcing through this, but I dare you. Go just try it.
I triple dog dare you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm this is a really serious topic, and I apologize that I'm making, I feel like I need to apologize for the levity, but because it's like, for me, I've been in this and it's such a dark place that my only way to sometimes, we gotta laugh. We still have to, it's serious. I get it. But for me, it's like, I do need to, I use jokes to deflect the real pain. So, because this is a hard topic, and this has been, this has been a lot of really heavy soul searching, and a lot of retrospection, and a lot of digging into stuff, that even talking with my mother about what her experience was like. Talking to my friends, talking to girlfriends, talking to, the men in my life about what's happened with them. This is, you sit in that shit long enough, man, it starts to burn. And so my way of kind of going through it is that I really still need to joke. We still gotta laugh, man. Like,
Yeah. And the listeners for this podcast, they've heard me laugh about stuff before. So, I mean, I have to.
Across as disrespectful, but if I had to, provide a little bit of a caveat to be like, hey, this is a hard topic, and I'm in therapy because this has just been dredging up a lot of stuff. So you gotta.
Oh, I'm sure.
Move through it.
Yeah. Okay, Christopher, do you think we've missed anything?
I don't think so.
This is so enjoyable.
Talking to you. I've really enjoyed this.
Yes, so have I. I would love to have you back on too. I know you're going to be super busy once you take this live and start going on tour with it. But I'd love to, even if you just like send me a little video that I can pop up of like, hey, this is where we are. This is what we're doing. That'd be so cool.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So when we're on the road with this, we're going to be traveling around in a tour bus. So it'll be myself and five other people that will be in the tour bus, and we're going to be not that I'm doing this now, but it will happen later. But we're going to be, while we're on the road, through the 2 years or 33 months that it's going to be up, we're going to be producing a podcast called The Crucible. So the Alchemy Art Workshop Crucible, and we'll be talking with people all across the country, with service providers, from lived experience, from survivors to people like me, like you, that will just come and talk about their own experience and add to the piece. So
yes.
the recordings then become part of the piece.
You see, this is what I'm talking about. Your kind of brain. This is such a good idea. How cool is that?
So we'll be producing that in the tour bus. So we'll have a little studio at a table in the bus. That will be our little podcast studio for me and a remote person and somebody on site, so that we can produce something and add that to the narrative.
I love this. I'm sad that it's so far away, but it'll be here in like no time.
No time. So we start fabricating third quarter of 2026.
This is so
cool. Fast. Mm-hmm. And all of this started on January 5th, 2025, and this is where I brought it. Like I said, I'm really unbelievably grateful that I tapped into this.
Well, as a survivor of intimate partner violence, I'm incredibly grateful that you've tapped into this. This is really something incredible.
This is a sad field to be working in. But like I said, I am so eternally optimistic. I can't not be optimistic that that we're going to shift the needle.
I think so. I really do think so. Okay, so do you have any words of wisdom or encouragement that you would like to leave with listeners?
Oh my God, I'm always coming up. I'm so afraid of like saying stupid things.
I say stupid things all the time.
I am so grateful. There is so much help out there for people. So, They're if you know somebody, you got to say something. Your silence is your own complicity, and we don't want to continue with the complicity. And to any artists out there, create good work.
Yes, I love it. Well, Christopher, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ingrid.
This was really great.
This was
I
lovely.
did too.
You are lovely.
You are lovely.
No, you.
No, you. All right. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Christopher, for joining me today. And thank you, Warriors, for listening. I've included the links Christopher was referring to, as well as his 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.